Hi guys, I'm doing another one of my walk and talk videos. I'm really fortunate that I'm joined here today by my buddy Todd. He's got his own YouTube channel. It's really amazing. It's about mechanics of walking. Please follow him on Todd Martin MD. And he also has a book called The Walking Code. So yeah, all my videos, because I'm a psychologist, start with tell me about your childhood. Just anything.
Oh, so my childhood. Yeah, I grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Park Forest. It's one of the southern suburbs, about 40 minutes away from the city. Grew up there, so it's very kind of small townish sort of feel. And then I went to school, college at Northwestern University, undergrad, and medical school at Northwestern, which is also in Chicago. Then spent a year, actually before going to medical school, did a year abroad in Europe. At the University of Sussex, which was an amazing time, kind of helped me grow up and get away from home a bit before I came back and went to medical school. And then came back to, not back to, but out to San Diego because I wanted to escape the cold weather of Chicago. Chicago's an amazing city, but it's really cold in the wintertime. Didn't want to live there the rest of my life, so I only interviewed for residency programs in warm places. So that brought me out to California. Fell in love with San Diego right away, moved here and did my residency. Then I've been working here ever since as a family medicine practitioner.
Yeah, you can't complain about San Diego. That's great. So what got you interested in walking?
Well, as I was working, actually during my residency program about 30 years ago, I started studying Argentine tango and became a tango instructor and met my wife doing that. Became a tango performer, and then that kind of got me into body mechanics in general. And then I got into walking because I was realizing my patients were having so many other medical problems like knee arthritis, plantar fasciitis, back pain, hip arthritis, everything. And it was very often, we're going to go across that like that, up left. A lot of their problems were correlated with the way they were walking. When I take them out into the hallway and I watch them walk, there was almost always some sort of dysfunctional gait that they had that seemed to be related to the pain problem they were having. And so that's what got me into wanting to help people with their walking technique. And at the same time, I was also trying to work on becoming a better dance instructor, to be able to tell people exactly how to do movements correctly rather than just demonstrating them. Because I did find it frustrating sometimes when you just demonstrate a movement to a person. Some people can get it, and then some people can't get it just by watching. And then I was studying Tai Chi at the same time and found the same thing with their instruction. If you can't get it just by watching them do the movement, then they don't really have a next level to go to teach you. It just repeat, and hopefully you'll get the repetition by visual alone. And so I wanted to figure out exactly what it is that makes the movements happen. And that's where I really started to study and develop the walking code and also the Tai Chi code, learning how we use our core to make movements like Tai Chi or dancing happen. And then of course that applies to walking as well. And after doing that, it allowed me to be able to really teach people how to improve their whole body movement and keep their spine aligned and keep their joints aligned and hopefully walk with lower impact. And so I've been doing that on YouTube now for about 8 years, trying to help people learn how to move better, reduce their impact, and keep their joints healthy.
That's great. Yeah, you know what? I don't know if you forget to push the button.
Let me put the button. I don't know if you need to push the button.
Yeah, I think
I'll
so.
push it anyway. Wait.
But that was actually my question, because how does the pathology happen, right? Like I would think, well, I was born, I learned how to sit, how to crawl, eventually I stood up, I learned how to walk. How would I, that's natural. So how does pathology develop in walking, and what does it look like?
Yeah, so why do people walk in ways that are not helpful for their joints?
Right.
I think you can just observe when you watch crowds of people walking that we all don't walk in the same way.
Right.
There's all kinds of variety of people walking. You get some people walking actually probably up to half of people these days walking with duck feet where their feet are turned out. You've got some people that are leaning forward and clearly falling in to their step. You've got people that are wildly swinging their arms forward. Some people are swinging their arms across their body. So many different ways of people walking. Why people develop those is hard to say.
Okay.
I know for me, and I told this story in one of my recent YouTube videos, when I was in high school, I think at the time, like the summer before going to undergrad, I did a research program at Northwestern University where I would come, take the train out of the city, and then walk a mile up Michigan Avenue to Northwestern University, and I would try to walk really fast to get there. And so I was like plowing away down the street, and I was thinking I was just walking faster, but it was really causing me to lean forward and slam into my heels. And I think I developed that as just my natural way of walking. And it probably started there. And then I remember as I was being a doctor, 20 years ago, nurses would say like, "Hello, Dr. Martin, I knew that was you coming around the corner. I could hear your footsteps because they're so loud." Yeah. And I didn't realize that was because I wasn't walking functionally. And then one day my wife, when we were walking hand in hand down the street, yanked her hand out of my hand and said, like, "You got to stop holding my hand. You're pulling me," and like yanking my shoulder. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, "Yeah, you're pitching forward and like yanking my shoulder. It hurts." I'm like, "Oh, okay, I must not have been paying attention, so let me just walk normally now." And then I grabbed her hand, walked for a few steps, she like yanked it again. She's like, "No, I'm not holding your hand because you're yanking me." And so that is one of the first things that pointed me in the direction that I didn't know what I was doing when I was walking, even though I was already a dance instructor at the time. So that's when I kind of went into the tank. It's around the same time I started studying Tai Chi, and it all kind of came together at the same time. But so I had a dysfunctional walking technique. Why I developed that, I think that is the explanation, but I could have been doing it even beforehand, who knows?
Right.
Other people, I think when you're trying to walk really slow, one way of walking very slowly is to turn your feet out and do duck foot walking, because when you walk with duck feet, you're really swinging with your swing leg rather than powering from the standing leg, and it really does create a slower walk. And I notice a lot of Hollywood male actors walking with duck feet, like even very fit ones. Idris Elba, Jason Statham, they have terrible duck feet.
That's interesting.
And I wonder if that's because they're always having to walk towards a camera slowly, and often walking with a woman who's walking slowly, maybe in heels. And in order to slow themselves down to do the filming, they have naturally, even subconsciously, adopted a walk that is going to be much more slow and relaxed, even though it's not a healthy walk.
Yeah.
And so I do speculate that that's an issue. Versus women, often if you're wearing heels, they're very less likely to be duck-footed because you can't walk with duck feet and heels. So women who wear heels are generally not going to be duck-footed, but the heels pitch you forward, and then so women end up with different pathologies of like anterior pelvic tilt, where the pelvis is tilted forward and they have the arch in the back. You see some women who wearing like tight clothing, and you can just see this huge arch in their back when they're walking, especially if they're walking in platform heels. And then they just develop this walking pattern associated with that. You see kids walking with backpacks. They put the backpack on, they're walking down the street, and you can see half of them leaning forward, kind of like what I was doing when I was plowing through, but the backpack just accentuates it.
Right.
And if you do that long enough, you develop a pattern. And then that pattern just becomes in your body memory, and that's what happens. So I assume there's some thing that generates your natural pattern of movement, whatever it is, whether it's the backpack or plowing forward or the shoes you're wearing, all kinds of variations that we have that affect us in different ways. And most people are never thinking about it. Nobody learns how to walk properly, so we just develop what we develop, and that just becomes our status quo.
And it's obviously correctable because you fixed your walk. Your wife now holds your hand.
Yeah, it took a while. It took 3 to 6 months Like after a while, I thought I had it, and I would hold her hand, and she'd like, "Yeah, you're not pitching forward, but I can tell you're thinking about it." So, so it was like, yeah. So don't hold my hand because I can tell you're studying right now.
Okay.
But so after I did it, after about 6 months, it just became very natural. I had no problems anymore, and since then, yeah, I'm able to walk down the street with my wife's hand in my hand without any challenge.
And you developed you mentioned the walking code. What is that? I know it's your book, but
Yeah, so it started with the Tai Chi code. So when I was trying to analyze what makes the movements happen, I began studying what are called the Tai Chi trigrams. So in Tai Chi, there's 8 foundational energies, and they're represented in an ancient book of wisdom called the I Ching. And there are 3 lines, one that represents either yin or yang energy for each of the lines, and they're not really explainable, or they're not supposed to be explainable. But I began to try to correlate those 3 lines with 3 elements of our core, the upper waist, the lower waist, and our hips. And I was trying to put them together to see if we could correlate our core movement with the trigrams and explain the movements in Tai Chi. And I was able to put it together in a way that made sense. And initially I thought maybe that was just a fluke because the trigrams are not supposed to be explainable. But what I found was that with the explanation I came up with, you could explain every movement in Tai Chi that I was studying. And then I applied those same movements to Tango, which is what I was teaching with my wife, and realized that they were applicable in Tango as well. And then I applied them to walking, and you could then explain every movement in walking with those 3 elements of the core, your upper waist rotation, your lower waist rotation, and your hip action. And so that became the Tai Chi code and the walking code and the Tango code. So basically they're all using the same movement system defined by those Tai Chi trigrams, or at least my interpretation of them, and applied to our core movement. So those are the codes, and that's what I teach on the channel.
that's great. Go buy his book. And it's, as we talked earlier, it's actually connected, right? I was mentioning your recent video about moving of the hips, and in Tai Chi, that whole spiral movement that comes from the core.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. Okay. Well, maybe we can wrap it up, but let me ask you, what would be like one thing you would leave the viewers with, one advice about walking, like what you consider most important thing or interesting thing?
Yeah, the most important thing that I would say about walking is to be aware that walking technique is something that's important. And if you're feeling discomfort when you walk, either in your heels, like you land very heavily, your knees hurt when you're walking, especially if you're walking upstairs or walking uphill, or you're having lower back pain, posture issues, it all may come to your walking technique, and if you're not even thinking about it, you'll never be able to fix it. So the first thing I would do for people is recommend trying to have some awareness of the way you walk, and if you're having some problems, then you can work on trying to correct it and get a more optimal walking technique. And for that, I would recommend coming to my channel, Todd Martin MD, on YouTube. Free lessons there where I talk about all of these movement patterns and how you can consciously correct them.
Yeah, definitely, guys, visit the channel. I've learned so much. Before this interview, we were talking about swinging arms, and I had some misguided ideas, and Todd corrected me. I've been following his channel for years, and as you know, I'm into walking, so I find it so interesting. So again, Todd Martin MD, go check him out, and please subscribe. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day, and get out there and get some exercise done, get some movement. Bye.